The drive from Vegas to California is usually a test of patience, a straight shot through a shimmering, heat-baked desert. But what happened to me on that highway? It wasn't just a test of patience. It was a test of my sanity. It all started with the heat, a suffocating 110-degree blanket that made the air itself feel thick and heavy. My car's AC was fighting a losing battle, and the sun was a merciless eye in the sky. I'd left Vegas late, hoping to beat the worst of the traffic. But now, with miles of empty asphalt stretching ahead, I was starting to regret it. The desert at night is a different beast, and I was about to learn just how different. The first sign something was wrong was the coyote. It darted out onto the road, and I slammed on my brakes, my tires screeching in protest. It was huge, way bigger than any coyote I'd ever seen, with ragged, mangy fur. But the weirdest part was its eyes. In the brief glare of my headlights, they didn't just reflect the light, they seemed to glow with their own unsettling intelligence. It stared right at me, not with the fear of an animal, but with a cold, calculating look. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I shook my head, blaming the heat and the long drive. Just a weird desert animal, premeditated myself, but a knot of unease had already started to form in my stomach. About an hour later, the car started sputtering. The temperature gauge shot into the red, and steam began pouring from under the hood. I cursed, pulling over to the shoulder. I was in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no other cars. Just the endless desert and the vast, stardusted sky. My phone had no service. Of course, I popped the hood, and a cloud of hot steam hit me in the face. The radiator was toast. I was stranded, standing by the side of the road. I felt a sudden, primal fear. The silence was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine. It was a silence that felt heavy, watchful. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. It was a faint cry, like a baby. My blood ran cold. A baby. Out here. It couldn't be. I scanned the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The crying came again, closer this time, from somewhere out in the scrub brush. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in the car, to lock the doors and wait for daylight. But the sound was so pitiful, so desperate. What if someone had crashed? What if a family needed help? Against my better judgment, I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from my glove compartment and stepped out into the oppressive night. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small and weak. "Is anyone there?" The crying stopped. The sudden silence was even more terrifying. I swept my flashlight beam across the landscape. Rocks, cacti, and shadows that danced like ghostly figures. Nothing. "Hello," I called again, a little louder. Then I heard a rustling in the bushes to my right. My light snapped towards the sound. Two eyes, low to the ground, reflected the beam. It was the coyote from before, or at least, I thought it was. It was just standing there, watching me. Its head was tilted in a way that seemed unnaturally curious. The baby cries started again, but this time they were coming from the direction of the coyote. No, that wasn't possible. My mind was playing tricks on me. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the creature. The coyote took a step forward and then another. It wasn't moving like a normal animal. Its gait was wrong, jerky and uneven, as if it was still learning how to use its legs. And the sound was coming from its throat, a perfect imitation of a crying infant, a chilling, flawless mimicry. This was no coyote. My heart felt like it was going to explode. The stories my grandfather used to tell me, tales I'd dismissed as campfire folklore, came rushing back. Stories of skinwalkers, shapeshifters who could take the form of animals and mimic human voices to lure their victims. I scrambled back into my car, fumbling with the lock. The thing outside let out a sound that was no longer a baby's cry. It was a low, guttural laugh that seemed to mock my terror. It scraped its claws along the side of my car, a sound like nails on a chalkboard that went straight to my bones. I huddled in the driver's seat, flashlight beam fixed on the window. shaking uncontrollably. Then I saw its face pressed against the glass. It wasn't a coyote's face anymore. It was something in between. A horrific, distorted blend of human and animal features. The eyes were human dark, intelligent, and filled with a terrifying, ancient malice. The snout was elongated. The teeth were long and sharp like a wolf's, and its skin was stretched tight over its skull. It started whispering my name. It was a dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement, but it was my name, Daniel. It hissed, its breath fogging the window. "Let me in, Daniel. It's so cold out here." But it wasn't cold. It was a furnace outside. How did it know my name? Panic seized me. I started honking the horn, a frantic, desperate rhythm, hoping to scare it away or attract help. The thing recoiled from the noise, snarling, its face contorting in rage. It backed away from the car and began to change. Its form twisted and elongated, bones cracking and reshaping in the pale moonlight. It was growing taller, shedding its canine features, becoming horrifyingly, impossibly human-like. But it was all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at unnatural angles. It stood there, a tall, gaunt silhouette against the stars, a grotesque parody of a man. It raised a long, spindly arm and pointed a finger at me. And then it spoke, not in a whisper, but in a clear, calm voice that sounded eerily familiar. It was my father's voice. "Daniel, son, open the door. I had an accident. I need your help." My father was safe at home in California, hundreds of miles away. My mind screamed, "It's a trick," but hearing his voice, so perfectly replicated, sent a fresh wave of horror through me. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sound. "It's not real. It's not real." I chanted to myself like a mantra. The torment went on for what felt like an eternity. It cycled through voices: my mother, my sister, my best friend, each one begging, pleading, trying to find a weakness in my resolve. It would scratch at the doors, tap on the roof, and whisper my deepest fears into the night. It knew things it shouldn't know. The desert itself seemed to be holding its breath, a silent witness to my nightmare. Just as I thought I was going to lose my mind completely, I saw it, a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror, growing larger. A truck was coming. Hope, pure and brilliant, surged through me. The Skinwalker saw it too. It let out a final, frustrated shriek. It was a mix of a dozen different animal cries, a sound that made the car vibrate. Then, it turned and melted back into the desert shadows, disappearing as if it were never there. The semi-truck roared past, its driver probably oblivious to the life and death struggle that had just played out on the side of the road. But its passing broke the spell. Other cars started to appear, the first signs of the morning commute. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, a highway patrol officer pulled up behind me. I could barely speak, babbling about a monster, about the voices. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern, probably thinking I had heat stroke. He called a tow truck for me. As I waited, I looked out at the desert, now bathed in the gentle morning light. It looked so peaceful, so ordinary, but I knew what was out there. I knew what walked the lonely highways when the sun went down. I never told anyone the full story. Who would believe me? But I know what I saw, and I know I'll never drive that stretch of road at night again, because some things are better left undisturbed in the vast, silent desert, and some stories are true, whether you want to believe them or not. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more chilling tales. Stay safe out there. The engine screamed, but my tires found no purchase on the black ice. 1 second I was driving, the next, my truck was spinning, a metal top on a frozen highway. It crashed backward into a ditch, the impact jolting every bone in my body. The snow was already coming down hard, a blizzard swallowing the outskirts of Chicago. My phone had no signal. I was stranded. I checked the glove box, found a half-empty water bottle and a crumpled protein bar. Great. The plan was simple. Stay in the truck, stay warm, and wait for a snowplow. Hours crept by. The world outside was a swirling vortex of white. The only sounds were the howling wind and the groaning of metal as the truck settled. Then, another sound cut through the storm. A faint, rhythmic crunching. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks, or maybe an animal. But the sound grew closer, more deliberate. Crunch. 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 It was the sound of heavy footsteps in deep snow. I strained to see through the frosted windshield. A figure was emerging from the blizzard. It was tall, impossibly so, and skeletal thin, its limbs long and gangly. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, like a puppet with its strings. Tangled, my heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a rescuer. This was something else. It was walking along the highway, its head turning from side to side, as if searching. Primera ducked down, my breath fogging the cold air in front of my face. Don't let it see me. Please, don't let it see me. The crunching stopped right beside my truck. Silence. A thick, heavy silence that was somehow louder than the storm. I squeezed my eyes shut, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. I could feel a presence, a malevolent energy pressing in on the cab. A shadow fell over the driver's side window. I didn't dare look. Just pry it. A sharp, scratching sound raked against the metal of the door. It was like long fingernails dragging down a chalkboard. Then a tap. Tap. Then the glass. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The tapping became more frantic, insistent. It was trying to get my attention. It knew I was in here. Slowly, I forced myself to turn my head. What I saw will haunt my nightmares forever. Pressed against the glass was a face that was barely human. The skin was stretched tight over a skull, gray and translucent, like old parchment. The eyes were sunken into deep, dark sockets, but they glowed with a faint, hungry light. Its mouth was a lipless slit that stretched too wide, filled with jagged, yellowed teeth. And the smell, even through the sealed cab, a coppery, rotten scent seeped in. It was the smell of decay and ancient hunger. It opened its mouth, and a sound came out that wasn't a word, but something far older and more terrifying. It was a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the truck, a sound of pure, ravenous need. It raised a long, bony hand, its fingers ending in blackened, broken claws, and traced a line on the frosty window. It was looking right at me, its gaze pinning me in place. Fear gave way to pure, primal terror. I fumbled for the ignition, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key. The engine sputtered, wind, and finally caught. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched, piercing sound that made my ears ring. It threw its weight against the truck, rocking it violently. I slammed the gear into drive, flooring the gas pedal. The tires spun uselessly, kicking up snow and ice. The creature slammed against the door again, harder this time, the metal groaning under the force. I kept my foot pressed to the floor, praying for a miracle. The tires finally bit into something solid. The truck lurched forward, skidding out of the ditch and back onto the icy asphalt. I didn't look back. Primera? Good. Ian. The creature's horrifying shriek followed me, echoing through the blizzard, a promise of a hunt that had just begun. I swerved down the highway, fishtailing wildly, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. For a few terrifying seconds, I could see it, a tall, spindly silhouette running after the truck, its long legs covering the ground at an impossible speed. It kept pace with me, its glowing eyes a beacon in the storm. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it veered off the road and vanished back into the swirling snow. I drove for what felt like an eternity, my body trembling. The image of that face burned into my mind. When I finally saw the flashing lights of a police car and a snowplow, I pulled over and collapsed over the steering wheel, sobbing. They said I was lucky, that the blizzard was one of the worst in years. They towed my truck and gave me a ride into the city. I tried to tell them what I saw, "A tall man," I said. "A strange man." They just nodded, blaming it on hypothermia and shock. But I know what I saw. I've read the old stories, the legends, the Native American tribes tell of a spirit born of starvation and cannibalism, an eternal hunger that roams the coldest, most desolate places. I don't drive at night anymore, especially not when it snows. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I can almost hear it. That high-pitched shriek, that sound of insatiable hunger. I know it's still out there, in the cold and the dark, walking the lonely highways, forever searching. And I know it remembers me, the one that got away. The old Finnish sauna sat at the edge of the lake like a forgotten secret, a place my grandfather had built with his own hands. After he passed, I took it upon myself to maintain it, making the long drive out to the backcountry property whenever city life became too much. The solitude was a balm. The deep woods, the placid water, the hiss of steam on hot rock sit was my sanctuary. This past weekend, I went up alone. The air was already turning cold, a sharp autumn bite that promised an early winter. I spent the afternoon chopping wood, stacking it neatly by the sauna's small porch. By the time dusk began to paint the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, I was ready. I stoked the wood-burning stove, the heart of the sauna, until the rocks glowed a menacing red. The air inside grew thick and heavy. I ladled water over the stones, and the room exploded with a cloud of searing steam. It was perfect. I sat on the highest bench, letting the intense heat soak into my bones, my muscles unknotted from a week of stress. The only window was a small, thick pane of glass in the door, looking out towards the darkening lake. Outside, the world was silent, save for the distant cry of a loon. It was a peaceful sound, one I'd heard 1,000 times. But tonight, it sounded different, sharper, more desperate. I dismissed it as my imagination, amplified by the isolation. I ladled more water, and another wave of steam enveloped me. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the cedar wall. That's when I heard the first sound that wasn't mine, a soft thump against the outside wall. I froze, every sense on high alert. It was probably just a branch falling from one of the massive pines surrounding the sauna. I told myself to relax, but then I heard another sound, a slow, deliberate scraping. It sounded like fingernails dragging along the rough wood siding, moving from the back of the structure towards the front. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hiss of the stove. I held my breath, listening. The scraping stopped right at the door. A profound, unnatural silence fell. Even the loon had gone quiet. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the blood roaring in my ears. I stared at the small window in the door, my eyes straining to pierce the gloom. The steam in the room was so thick now that the glass was completely fogged over, a milky white canvas. I couldn't see anything outside. I tried to calm myself. It was an animal. A bear? Maybe. Or a raccoon. They were common here, curious about the warmth, the strange smells. But the scraping, it hadn't sounded like paws. It sounded like hands. I reached for the ladle again, my hand trembling. Maybe another blast of steam would settle my nerves. As I poured the water, the room became a whiteout. The heat was almost unbearable, but it was the silence that was truly suffocating. I kept my eyes locked on the fogged-up window. And then I saw it. It started slowly, appearing out of the condensation. A line, then another, drawing itself on the glass. It wasn't on the outside, it was on the inside. A long, slender finger was tracing a shape in the steam, just inches from my face. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, watching as a full handprint began to form. The fingers were too long, too thin. The palm was strangely narrow. It was a mockery of a human hand, drawn from the inside of the glass by something on the outside. A guttural sound rumbled from the other side of the door, a low, wet clicking. It wasn't the sound of any animal I had ever heard. It sounded like it was trying to speak, to mimic a word, but its throat wasn't shaped for it. Panic finally broke through my paralysis. I scrambled off the bench, slipping on the wet floorboards, and fumbled for the towel I'd left by the inner door to the changing room. The clicking grew louder, more insistent. It was joined by a scratching at the door itself, the sound of sharp nails digging into the wood, trying to find a purchase. I yanked the changing room door open and stumbled through, slamming it shut behind me. I didn't bother with the latch. I just leaned against it with all my weight, my body shaking uncontrollably. The changing room was small and dark, the only light a faint sliver coming from under the main door. The scratching stopped. For a terrifying moment, I thought it was gone. Then I heard a new sound. A wet, tearing noise. It was the sound of wood splintering. I looked down at the main door. A dark, thin object was pushing its way through the wood near the handle. It was one of those long, sharp fingers breaking through the cedar plank. It wiggled, then the scratching started again, this time with a frantic, tearing urgency. It was trying to claw its way through. I had to get out. The only other exit was a small window at the back of the changing room, barely big enough for a child to crawl through. It was my only chance. I scrambled over to it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the simple latch. Behind me, a loud crack echoed through the small space as the main doors would begin to give way. The window finally swung open with a groan. I didn't hesitate. I threw myself through the opening, scraping my back and shoulders on the rough frame. I landed hard on the cold, damp ground outside, gasping for air. The autumn night felt like a freezer against my sweat-soaked skin. I didn't look back. Just ran. I ran towards the faint lights of my car, parked 100 yards up the path. Behind me, I heard a terrible shriek of rage and frustration, a sound that split the night in two. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else entirely. It was a sound of pure, malevolent hunger. I threw myself into my car, jamming the key into the ignition. My hands were slick with sweat, and it took 3 tries before the engine roared to life. As my headlights cut through the darkness, they illuminated the sauna. The door was hanging off one hinge, splintered and broken, and standing in the doorway was a figure. It was tall and emaciated, its limbs impossibly long and jointed at unnatural angles. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, like old parchment. It had no face to speak of, just a smooth expanse of skin with 2 dark, hollow pits where eyes should be. It turned its head towards my car, and even without eyes, I could feel its gaze lock onto me. It took a step out of the sauna, its long, spindly legs moving with a horrifying, insect-like grace. It opened its mouth, a featureless slit that stretched impossibly wide, and let out that same clicking, chattering sound, now mixed with a high-pitched whistle that sounded disturbingly like my name. I slammed the car into reverse, gravel spraying from under the tires. I didn't care about the path. I just needed to get away. I swung the car around and floored it, not looking in the rearview mirror until I hit the main dirt road. I drove 4 miles, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest, before I dared to slow down. I never went back to the property. I called a realtor the next day and told them to sell it. To sell everything. I didn't care about the money. Some places hold more than just memories. That sauna wasn't a sanctuary. It was a hunting blind. And that night, I wasn't the one enjoying the solitude. I was the one being watched. I still see that handprint sometimes, traced in the steam on my bathroom mirror after a hot shower. A reminder of what waits in the quiet places, listening and drawing you in with the promise of warmth. Thanks for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share, send it to me at the email in the description. And if you enjoyed this, please hit like and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. The forest holds secrets, ancient and dark. Most people visit Estes Park for the breathtaking views of the Rockies, to see the elk, to feel the crisp mountain air. But I came here looking for a different kind of wild. I came looking for a story, a legend whispered on the wind, a creature of insatiable hunger. I came looking for the Wendigo. My journey began with local folklore, hushed talis, told around campfires, about hikers who vanished, without a trace, leaving behind only a single, strange track in the snow. They spoke of a chilling whistle that echoes through the pines on moonless nights, a sound that freezes the blood and promises a gruesome end. The old-timers in town would just shake their heads, their eyes holding a deep, unspoken fear. Some things are best left undisturbed. One of them warned me, his voice barely a whisper. But I was a fool. I thought it was just a story. I set up my base camp deep within the Roosevelt National Forest, just a few miles from the edge of Estes Park. The first few days were peaceful, almost deceivingly so. The beauty of the landscape was immense, with towering peaks scraping the sky and ancient trees standing like silent sentinels. I spent my days hiking, documenting, taking photos, feeling the profound solitude of the wilderness. But as the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, a different feeling would creep in, a sense of being watched. It started subtly, a twig snapping just beyond the glow of my campfire, a shadow flitting at the edge of my vision. I'd dismiss it as a deer or a coyote, my rational mind fighting against the primal fear that was slowly taking root. But then came the sounds. On the third night, I was woken by a high-pitched cry, almost like a woman's scream, but distorted, warped into something utterly inhuman. It was carried on the wind, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I found it, a footprint, pressed deep into the soft earth near a stream. It was long, unnaturally so, with 3 sharp-looking toes. It was nothing like a bear or a mountain lion. It was exactly as the legends had described. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was real, and it was close. That's when I made my biggest mistake. Instead of packing up and running, I decided to follow the tracks, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. I pushed deeper into the woods, leaving the marked trails far behind. The forest grew denser. The sunlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy, and an eerie silence descended, broken only by the crunch of my own boots. The tracks led me to a narrow ravine, a dark scar in the earth, and there I found its lair. Piles of bones, picked clean and scattered about. Most were animal deer, elk, even a bear. But then I saw it, a tattered hiking boot, still laced up, lying next to a splintered human femur. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of decay and something else. Something wild and musky. Panic finally seized me. I turned to flee, but it was too late. A guttural growl echoed from the shadows of the ravine. I didn't see it at first, just a shape moving, a tall, skeletal figure unfolding itself from the darkness. It was impossibly thin, its skin stretched taut over protruding bones, the color of ash. Its limbs were long and spindly, ending in razor-sharp claws. But its head was the stuff of nightmares. A deer's skull, antlers cracked and broken, sat atop its narrow shoulders, and from the empty sockets of that skull, 2 points of malevolent, glowing light stared directly at me. It let out that same chilling whistle I'd heard before, a sound that resonated deep in my bones. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated hunger. Primera, traene. I've never run so fast in my life. I didn't look back. Branches whipped at my face. Roots tripped me, but I scrambled back up, fueled by sheer terror. I could hear it behind me, its long strides effortless, the snapping of twigs getting closer and closer. It wasn't just chasing me, it was toying with me, enjoying the hunt. The whistle echoed through the trees, a constant, terrifying reminder of the predator on my heels. I could hear its ragged breaths, a dry, rattling sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw it closing the distance, its skeletal frame moving with a terrifying, unnatural graze. Its glowing eyes burned into me, promising a fate worse than death. I burst out of the tree line and stumbled onto a dirt road, my lungs on fire, my legs screaming. A pair of headlights cut through the twilight. A truck screeched to a halt just inches from me. The driver, an old hunter, saw the look on my face, saw the direction I'd come from, and he knew. "Get in," he screamed, his face pale. I threw myself into the passenger seat, and he slammed on the gas. As we sped away, I looked back at the tree line. For a split second, I saw it standing there, a tall, gaunt silhouette against the dying light, its deer skull head tilted as if in curiosity. Then it simply melted back into the shadows of the forest. I left Estes Park the next day. I didn't pack my camp. I left everything behind. I just drove and didn't stop until the mountains were a faint line in my rearview mirror. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of that whistle echoing in my ears. I went to the Rockies looking for a legend, and I found it, but the truth is far more terrifying than any story. The Wendigo is real. It's out there in the deep, dark woods of Colorado, and it's always hungry. So if you ever find yourself hiking near Estes Park and you hear a strange whistle in the wind, don't be a fool like me. Just run. Thanks for watching. If you have your own terrifying encounters, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the edge of the unknown. Stay safe out there. It was supposed to be a fun, late-night adventure. Just me, my friend Leo, and the thrill of a geocache hunt deep in the woods. We'd done this dozens of times, but never this far out. Never in a place with so many local legends whispered about it. The cache was called The Forester's Secret, and the last person to find it had left a cryptic note online. Don't go after dark. The woods have eyes. We laughed it off, of course. We were experienced hikers, not superstitious kids. The air grew heavy and cold as we ventured deeper, our headlamps cutting sharp cones of light through the suffocating darkness. The GPS on my phone was our only guide, the little blue dot inching closer to the treasure icon. Leo was ahead, his breath pluming in the chilly air. "Should be just over this ridge," he called back, his voice sounding a little too loud in the dead silence. That's when the first sound reached Yusa. Soft snap of a twig, somewhere off to our right. We both froze, listening. Probably just a deer, Premet had told myself. But the silence that followed was different. It was watchful. We kept mobbing, a little faster this time. The GPS now showed we were only 50 feet away. That's when we heard it again, closer. A rustle in the undergrowth, followed by a low guttural sound. It wasn't an animal I recognized. Leo nervously joked, "Maybe it's Bigfoot coming to help us find the cache." But his laughter was strained. I felt a primal fear prickle the back of my neck. Something was wrong. "We're here," I whispered, my eyes glued to the phone. The GPS showed the cache was directly on top of our location. We swept our lights around, searching for the hidden container and old ammo box, according to the description. We checked behind rocks, in the hollows of ancient trees, under thick ferns. Nothing. "This is weird," Leo mumbled, his voice trembling slightly. "The GPS says it's right here." He was right. I looked at my phone again, and a cold dread washed over me. The cache icon was gone. In its place, a new marker had appeared, a little arrow, and it was moving. Slowly, the arrow swiveled on the screen, as if reorienting itself. It pointed away from us for a second, then swung back, locking on. It pointed directly at Leo. We stared at the screen, then at each other, our faces pale in the glow of our headlamps. "What the hell is that?" Leo stammered. Before I could answer, the arrow on my screen moved again. It slid from Leo's position directly to mine, hovering over the little blue dot that represented me. My heart hammered against my ribs. The GPS arrow pointed directly at my chest. Then came the whistle. A high, thin, piercing sound that mimicked the tune Leo had been whistling earlier. It came from the darkness just beyond our lights. We snapped our heads in its direction, but saw only a wall of black. The whistling stopped, replaced by a voice, a distorted, mocking whisper that sounded like a recording of my own voice saying, "Probably just a deer." That's when we saw it. 2 points of light, low to the ground, reflecting our headlamps. They weren't the eyes of a deer or a coyote. They were too far apart, and they glowed with a sickening, intelligent yellow light. They blinked slowly, and then they began to rise, higher and higher, until they were well over 6 feet off the ground. A tall, impossibly thin silhouette began to take shape against the trees, its limbs long and jointed at unnatural angles. It took a step towards us, and the sound it made was like bones grinding together. It wasn't walking, it was unfolding. The whistling started again, but this time it was Leo's nervous laughter, perfectly mimicked, echoing through the trees. We didn't scream. We couldn't. We were frozen in pure, absolute terror. The creature tilted its head, a gesture so unnervingly human that it broke the spell. We turned and ran. We didn't look back. We just crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces, our lungs burning. Behind us, we could hear it keeping pace, not with heavy footfalls, but with an eerie, silent speed. We could hear our own panicked breaths being mimicked, thrown back at us from the darkness. We heard my name being called in Leo's voice, and Leo's name being called in mine, desperate and pleading. "Wait up! I'm hurt," it cried, sounding exactly like me. But we knew it was a trick. My phone was still clutched in my hand, the screen a beacon of our terrifying reality. The arrow was still there, relentlessly tracking me, moving as I moved. It was a predator's targeting system, and we were the prey. We burst out of the tree line and sprinted across the open field towards my car, fumbling for the keys. The sound of the doors unlocking was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. We threw ourselves inside, locking the doors just as a heavy thud slammed against the driver's side window. I didn't dare look. I just jammed the key in the ignition and slammed the gas. The tires squealed as we shot out of the dirt parking lot and onto the main road. I drove 4 miles, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, before either of us dared to speak. Leo was sobbing quietly in the passenger seat. I finally risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The road behind us was empty, but my phone, lying on the center console, screen still lit, told a different story. The arrow was gone. In E.T.'s place, the geocache icon had reappeared. And next to it, a new comment from a user we didn't recognize. It said, "Thanks for the game. I'll be waiting for you to come back and play again." We never went geocaching again. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, and some woods are meant to be left alone. Because sometimes, when you go looking for something in the dark, you become the thing that gets found. The sound of an auger biting into thick ice is usually a comforting one for me. It's the sound of a good day ahead, of patience, and the promise of a fresh catch. But last winter, up on Lake of the Woods, that sound became the opening note to a symphony of absolute terror. My name is Alex, and I've been ice fishing since I could walk. I thought I knew everything about the cold, the silence, and the solitude. I was wrong. I'd set up my shack in a remote cove, miles from the nearest access point. It was perfect. The first day was blizzeye, pulled in walleye after walleye. The sun was bright, and the world felt simple. I had enough supplies to last a week, and I was looking forward to the quiet. That first night, as the temperature plummeted, I heard it. A single set of footsteps, heavy and slow, crunching on the snow outside my shack. I peeked through the small window, but saw nothing but the vast, empty expanse of the frozen lake, shimmering under the moonlight. I figured it was just the ice shifting, or my mind playing tricks on me. The next day, fishing was terrible. The fish finder showed plenty of activity below, but nothing was biting. It was as if they were scared, hiding. A strange feeling of being watched crept over me, a constant prickle on the back of my neck. I tried to shake it off, blaming the isolation. But when night fell, the footsteps returned. This time, it didn't sound like one person. It sounded like 2, maybe 3, circling my shack. The crunching was heavier, more deliberate. I held my breath, my ear pressed against the thin wall. They walked around and around, a slow, predatory patrol. Again, I looked outside. Nothing. Just my own tracks leading to the shack and the endless, undisturbed snow. My heart pounded against my ribs. How could there be footsteps with no tracks? By the 3rd day, Primera Y saw an edge. I hadn't slept. Every creak of the ice, every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. The feeling of being watched was no longer a prickle. It was a heavy weight. I decided I'd pack up and leave the next morning. I just had to make it through one more night. That evening, as the last light of the sun bled from the sky, the air grew unnaturally still. The kind of silence that's so deep, it hurts your ears. Then, it started. It wasn't just a few sets of footsteps anymore. It sounded like a crowd, dozens of them, all circling, faster and faster. The crunching of snow was a constant, maddening rhythm. It was impossible. There was no one out there. I was miles from anyone. Then came a new sound, a low scraping against the side of the shack. Long, deliberate scratches, like claws dragging down the metal siding. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from my small wood stove, my knuckles white. The scraping moved, tracing the perimeter of my tiny shelter. It went on for what felt like an eternity. Then, a loud, violent bang on the door rattled the entire shack, and I yelled out, a pathetic, terrified scream. The footsteps stopped. The scraping stopped. Silence? A silence more terrifying than the noise it replaced. I was frozen in place, staring at the door, expecting it to burst open. Nothing happened. Minutes turned into an hour. The silence remained. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was out there. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I flung the door open. Poker raised, ready to face whatever it was. And I saw it. In the distance, at the edge of the tree line, a figure stood silhouetted against the moon. It was impossibly tall and gaunt, its limbs long and spindly, like the branches of a dead tree. It was skeletal, yet it moved, its head slowly turning towards me. Even from that distance, I felt its ancient, malevolent gaze lock onto mine. It wasn't human. It was something starved, something wrong. A Wendigo. I didn't need a second look. I slammed the door, barricaded it with my gear, and didn't move from that spot until the sun came up. The footsteps didn't return. The scraping was gone. As soon as the first rays of light hit the ice, I was out of there. I didn't even pack my gear. I ran until my lungs burned and I reached my truck. I didn't look back. I've tried to rationalize it since. The wind, the ice, the isolation, playing tricks on my mind. But I can't explain the scratches on the shack, and I will never, ever forget the sight of that skeletal figure watching me from the trees. A personification of hunger and the unforgiving cold. Some places are best left alone, and some silences are filled with things we aren't meant to understand. The ice keeps its secrets, and I'm lucky I didn't become one of them. Thanks for listening, and remember to be careful out there in the wild. You never know what's listening back. It was the third night of the blizzard, and the wind howled like a hungry animal outside our ranger station. I'm Leo, and for the past 5 years, I've been a park ranger up in the remote mountains of the Rockies. My partner, an old-timer named Gene, had been here for 30. We were tasked with a night patrol, checking on the emergency shelters along the North Ridge. The snow was coming down so thick, you couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. Gene, ever the pragmatist, just grunted and said, "The snow won't wait for us, kid. Let's move." We strapped on our snowshoes, the crunching sound muffled by the thick white blanket covering everything. The beams from our headlamps cut through the darkness, illuminating a world of swirling snowflakes. An hour into our patrol, something felt off. The usual night sounds of the forest were gone. No owls, no rustling of small creatures. Nothing. Just the relentless shriek of the wind and our own heavy breathing. Gene stopped dead in his tracks, holding up a hand. I stopped behind him, my heart starting to pound a little faster. "You hear that?" he whispered, his voice tight. I strained my ears, hearing only the wind. "Hear what?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just scanned the trees, his face a mask of concentration. "It sounds like whispering," he finally said. "Carried on the wind." Carried on the wind. I listened again, and this time, I caught it. Faint, guttural whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It sounded like a distorted imitation of human speech. A cruel mockery, a chill that had nothing to do with the cold snaked down my spine. We pushed on, trying to shake the unnerving feeling. The whispers seemed to follow us, always just at the edge of hearing. We reached the first shelter, a small A-frame cabin, and found it empty and secure. As we turned to leave, my headlamp beam caught something in the snow. Footprints. But they weren't human, and they weren't from any animal I recognized. They were long, impossibly thin, with 3 sharp-looking toes. What was truly terrifying was their pattern. They weren't just walking, they were pacing, circling the cabin over and over again. And they were fresh. The snow was still falling hard, but these tracks looked like they'd been made moments ago. Gene knelt, his gloved hand hovering over a print. "Whatever made these," he muttered, his voice low and grave. "It's big, and it's watching us." We decided to cut the patrol short and head back. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind, felt like a predator closing in. The whispers grew louder, clearer. They started to sound like familiar voice. It's my mother, my childhood friend, all calling my name from the darkness. Their voices laced with a desperate, pleading tone. I knew it was a trick, a horrible illusion, but it was hard to ignore. Gene grabbed my arm, his grip like steel. "Don't listen to it, Leo," he warned. "It's trying to get in your head. It wants to separate us." We were maybe halfway back to the station when the most horrifying thing happened. The blizzard was at its peak, and the world was a dizzying vortex of white. We stopped for a moment to get our bearings, and in the swirling snow, I saw our shadows. They were cast on the thick wall of falling snow in front of us by our headlamps, but they weren't right. My shadow stretched, its limbs elongating to grotesque proportions. Gene's shadow hunched over, its back arching like an animal about 2 pounds. We stood frozen in terror, watching our own silhouettes twist into monstrous shapes. Then, the impossible happened. As we stood perfectly still, our shadows started to move. They detached from us, taking on a life of their own. They took a step forward, then another, walking away from us into the blizzard. My shadow, tall and spider-like, and Gene's, hunched and bestial, just walked on without us. We were left standing there, our headlamps now casting no shadows at all, as if we had become ghosts. Gene let out a choked gasp. "It took them," he whispered. "It took our shadows." Panic finally broke through the fear. We ran. We ran blindly through the snow, not caring about direction, just needing to get away. The whispers turned into screams, mimicking our own voices. A symphony of our terror echoing through the trees. We could hear something crashing through the undergrowth behind us. Something unnaturally fast. It was keeping pace with us, tolling wheat. USA. We didn't dare look back. We burst through the tree line and saw the faint, warm lights of the ranger station. It felt like a lifetime away. With our lungs burning and our legs screaming, we threw ourselves against the door, fumbled with the lock, and collapsed inside. We slammed the door shut, locking every bolt we had. For a long time, we just lay on the floor, gasping for air, our bodies trembling uncontrollably. Outside, the wind howled, and mixed with it was a new sound, a low, guttural growl right outside the door. Then came the scratching, a slow, deliberate scraping of claws against the thick wood of the door. It went on for hours. The whispers continued, too, promising warmth, promising safety. If we would just open the door, they used Gene's wife's voice, my brother's voice. We huddled together, armed with a flare gun and a fire axe, just waiting for the dawn. When the sun finally rose, the scratching stopped. The whispers faded. The world was silent again, save for the gentle sound of snow falling. We waited another hour before Gene, his face pale and drawn, crept to the window. "It's gone," he said, his voice barely a whisper. When we finally dared to open the door, we saw the tracks. Tisame long 3-toed prints were everywhere around the station, deeply pressed into the snow. But there was something else. Next to them, perfectly formed in the fresh powder, were two sets of human footprints. They were our footprints, but we hadn't been outside. They started from the edge of the woods and walked right up to the door before vanishing. It was as if our shadows had come back, waiting for us. We never spoke of what we saw that night, not in detail. We filed a report about getting lost in the blizzard. But we both knew we had encountered something ancient and evil in those woods. Something that could steal your voice, your sanity, and even your shadow. I resigned a month later. I couldn't handle the mountains anymore. Sometimes, on cold, windy nights, I still think I can hear those whispers. And sometimes, when I'm alone in a dark room, I swear I can see my shadow move when I'm standing perfectly still. Whatever that thing was, I don't think it's done with me. It has a piece of me now, and I think one day it might come back to claim the rest. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe for more tales from the darkness. Stay safe out there. We were supposed to learn how to rappel down a cliff face that day. Who's to Simply Beginner's outdoor skills class? My friend, Leo, and I had signed up for it, thinking it'd be a fun way to spend a Saturday. The instructor, a rugged guy named Marcus, had us practice on a small, 10-foot incline first. Everything felt normal, safe even. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, and the scenery was breathtaking. We were on the edge of a massive canyon, a place locals whispered about but rarely visited. Te Kaidit Etojo Canyon, because of the way the wind howled through the rock formations, sounding like a pained scream. I remember laughing about it with Leo. If only we had listened. After we all got the hang of the basics, Marcus led us to the main event. A sheer 200-foot drop. He set up the anchor, checked our harnesses, and went over the safety procedures one last time. Remember, he said, his voice firm, trust your gear, trust your training, and never look down if you're feeling nervous. Classic advice. Leo went first. He was a natural, descending smoothly, his whoops of excitement echoing up from below. Then it was my turn. I clipped in, took a deep breath, and leaned back over the edge. The initial drop was terrifying, but then the adrenaline kicked in. It was incredible. The world shrank to just me, the rope, and the vast, empty space below. I was about halfway down when I felt it, a slight, unusual tug on the rope. It wasn't the normal, gentle sway. This was a sharp, deliberate pull from below. I paused, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I called down to Leo. Hey man, you're messing with the rope. His voice came back, faint and distant. What? No, I'm already at the bottom. Another tug, stronger this time. The rope went taut, vibrating like a guitar string. It felt like something, or someone, was climbing up towards me. My hands, slick with sweat, gripped the rope tighter. I tried to shout up to Marcus, but my voice was caught in my throat. Looking down was the biggest mistake of my life. The figure ascending my rope wasn't Leo. It wasn't human. It was long and emaciated, its limbs moving with a jerky, unnatural speed. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over bones that seemed too sharp, too long. But the face, that's what broke me. It was a grotesque copy of Leo's face, but the eyes were hollow, black pits, and the mouth was stretched into a silent, impossibly wide grin. It was climbing fast, its spindly fingers and toes digging into the rope, closing the distance between us with horrifying speed. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that bounced off the canyon walls. Panic took over. I let go of the brake handle, trying to slide down faster to get away, but the thing was still climbing, its weight fighting against mine. The rope was a tug-of-war, and I was losing. I could hear it now, a low, guttural, clicking sound, like insects chittering. It was so close, I could smell a foul, earthy scent, like a freshly opened grave. Its fake Leo face was just a few feet below me, those dead eyes fixed on mine. I fumbled with the carabiner on my harness, my mind screaming to just unclip, to fall, to do anything to escape this creature. But my fingers wouldn't work. They were numb with fear. Then, from above, Marcus yelled my name. I glanced up and saw his face, pale with shock, peering over the edge. "Hold on. Hey. Scream it. Whatever you do, don't let go." He started doing something with the anchor, trying to haul me up. The rope lurched upwards a few feet. The creature below let out a shriek, a sound that wasn't human or animal. It was pure rage and hunger. It lunged, its long arms stretching, its fingers brushing against my boot. I kicked out wildly, screaming, crying, begging for it to stop. The rope went slack for a terrifying second, then pulled tight again as Marcus regained his grip. Inch by agonizing inch, he pulled me up. The creature clung to the rope, swayed a dead anchor. Its shriek turning into a series of wet, choking coughs that sounded sickeningly like my own name. Every foot I was pulled up, it would try to scramble after me, its claws scraping against the rock face. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, trying to block out the sight of that grinning, stolen face. The last 20 feet were the worst. I could feel its cold breath on my legs. I was sobbing uncontrollably when Marcus and the other students finally grabbed my arms and hauled me over the ledge, collapsing onto the dusty ground. We didn't wait. We just grabbed our gear and ran. No one looked back. Behind us, that horrible shrieking echoed from the canyon, mixed with the sound of the wind. We didn't stop running until we reached our cars. We drove Hawaii, leaving Echo Jaw Canyon behind. But I knew, deep down, that a part of me would never leave. We never found Leo. The official report said he fell, that his equipment failed. They searched for days, but only ever found his empty harness at the base of the cliff. They never found a body. Marcus quit his job the next day and moved out of state. The rest of us in that class, we don't talk about it. Sometimes, at night, I still feel it. That tug on the rope. I'll wake up in a cold sweat, my hands clenched, feeling the phantom sensation of something climbing up from the darkness below. I see that face, Leo's face, twisted into a nightmare. They say skinwalkers can mimic voices to lure you in. But I never knew they could steal a face, too. They don't just hunt you. They become the people you trust. So if you're ever out in the wilderness, and you hear a familiar voice call your name, or you feel a strange pull from the shadows, don't look down, just run. And pray it hasn't already learned your face. I work pipeline integrity for a regional energy contractor out of Midland, Texas. Most days I'm checking sensors, recalibrating gauges, and logging leaks that no one else bothers to find. It's lonely work across wide country, but I don't mind the quiet. On May 12th, I was dispatched to verify a pressure fault along Line 17, a 30-year-old natural gas feed that cuts across the desert north of Pecos. The alert flagged at Station 14B, an unmonitored stretch with no surface access for 5 miles. A field rep on the radio told me the alarm kept tripping every night at the same time. I joked that maybe the sand was breathing. Then I drove out there to see for myself. The terrain was flat and colorless, nothing but sagebrush and sand ridges for miles. The heat shimmered low to the ground, bending the horizon. I parked beside the maintenance marker, a sun-bleached post with the line coordinates carved halfway off. The air was still, too still for that hour. When I opened the cab door, the smell of dry dust and faint sulfur hit me at once. I grabbed the gauge kit, the line schematic, and a shovel, then started my walk across the site. The only sound was the wind brushing across my suit fabric and the faint squeal of the truck cooling behind me. I found the sensor junction where the pressure alarm had triggered. The metal cap was buried just beneath the sand, still warm from the sun. I brushed it clean and connected my handheld reader. The line pressure was stable. No fault, no leak, nothing unusual. I tapped the screen again. The value dropped for 1 second, then spiked above maximum, as if something had pushed against the inside of the pipe. I reset the monitor and waited. The sand under my knees shifted, subtle but steady, like a slow pulse. I thought it might be venting gas, pressure waves from deeper in the system. I set the microphone probe into the ground, the headset filled with a low, rhythmic thump, evenly spaced. 2 regular 4-gas movement. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats again, a pattern. I switched frequencies. The same rhythm came through the backup channel, louder this time, as if the sound were closer to the surface. When I looked down, the sand was moving with it. I dug faster, clearing a section of pipe 3 feet across. The metal was smooth, but warm, far warmer than it should have been for that depth. I set my hand on it to feel the vibration. It wasn't random pressure at all. It was a heartbeat. Slow, steady, alive. Every few seconds, the line bulged slightly, the surface flexing against my palm. Then the gauge alarm screamed through my headset. Flatland tone, every sensor. Upstream tripping one after another. The ground went quiet. Then came a soft sound from beneath the sand, like a breath drawn in. The air around me changed, growing heavy with the smell of iron and rot. I stepped back, pulling the probe from the soil, but the pulse returned, faster now. I could feel it through my boots, a deep rhythm that crawled up through the soles. My radio clicked alive. A voice came through. It was mine, calm and tired. Pressure normal, no anomalies detected. The radio wasn't keyed. My hand was still at my side. I turned to leave. The sand beside the pipeline rose in a slow wave, maybe 2 feet high, and split open down the middle. Something moved just beneath the surface, long and jointed. Pressing against the dirt from inside, I caught a flash of metal, or bone, or both. The alarm tone changed pitch, turning from a steady beep into something that almost sounded like breathing. I stumbled backward and fell. The vibration spread outward, rolling under the sand to warn me. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The desert was silent again. No wind, no sound, just my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. The pipe beneath the sand was still warm, but the pulse had vanished. I packed my equipment without writing the final readings. When I looked back one last time, the sand over the junction had smoothed itself flat. The ground looked untouched. Back at the station, I filed a short report. Pressure irregularities due to sensor error. No physical damage observed. I deleted the audio from the probe recorder. The waveform wasn't mechanical. It was organic, layered, like 2 heartbeats playing over each other. I told myself it was an echo, maybe my own pulse traveling through the soil. Now, at night, I can still feel that rhythm sometimes. It comes through the mattress, faint but steady, matching my heartbeat until it isn't. Then it keeps going, slow and deliberate, long after mine has stopped.